In Western military academies, the standard model for understanding conflict usually traces back to the 19th century Prussian theorist Carl von Clausewitz. He defined war as a massive, violent collision of two living forces. Victory, according to this model, relies entirely on kinetic friction, decisive battlefield engagements, and the raw physical struggle of overpowering an enemy. But applying that brute force model to the modern world carries catastrophic risk. When global superpowers maintain nuclear arsenals capable of mutually assured destruction, and national economies are deeply intertwined through global digital networks, engaging in total physical warfare guarantees mutual collapse. Long before the invention of the nuclear bomb, a vastly different approach emerged from the chaos of China's ancient warring states period. The Art of War, traditionally attributed to the general Sun Tzu, was written as a strictly pragmatic rejection of the mass slaughter and total warfare consuming the era. Instead of seeking out a violent clash, the text presents a counterintuitive thesis. It argues that supreme excellence does not consist of winning every battle. Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without engaging in a single act of fighting. This strips the battlefield of its physical bloodshed. It transforms warfare into a pure equation of human psychology, information, and calculated positioning. To understand how a conflict is won before anyone throws a punch, we have to look at the concept of Shi. In physics terms, you can think of it as potential energy. It is the latent power inherent in a specific structural arrangement, rather than the kinetic force you would use in a direct frontal attack. Sun Tzu illustrates this with a simple metaphor. Imagine a round boulder perfectly balanced on the edge of a high mountain. When that boulder is released, it unleashes devastating power. But the power doesn't come from the tiny push that tips it over. The power comes entirely from the altitude. We see this exact principle in modern nuclear arsenals. A warhead sits securely in a silo. Its primary strategic objective is deterrence, and it achieves that objective completely through its structural existence. The weapon does its job by merely being positioned on the board, never needing to detonate. We can trace this same concept directly into modern corporate competition. Amazon built an overwhelming Shi by constructing a massive, hyper-efficient logistics and fulfillment network over decades. By making same-day delivery the baseline consumer expectation, they position themselves securely at the top of the mountain. Any competing retailer is automatically forced to fight an exhausting, uphill battle, burning through their own capital and resources before a customer even clicks buy. Across military standoffs and market battles, the actual fight is usually a formality. The winner is mathematically determined by whoever quietly established the superior potential energy long before the confrontation started. Beyond positioning, Sun Tzu's strategy relies heavily on the ancient Taoist concept of Wu-wei, which translates to effortless action. In practice, an organization must flow exactly like water, bypassing high, fortified places of strength and hastening downward into the vulnerable valleys of weakness. Consider the collapse of Blockbuster Video. They maintained a rigid, heavily physical infrastructure of thousands of retail locations. Netflix flowed entirely around that physical strength. By shifting the battlefield to mail delivery and the internet, they bypassed the physical retail space and turned Blockbuster's massive real estate footprint into a fatal liability. That same principle of formlessness is now dictating the future of kinetic warfare, specifically through the deployment of autonomous drone swarms. A drone swarm operates exactly like a fluid. There is no commander to assassinate, no capital city to capture, and no single center of gravity. If air defenses destroy 20% of the drones, the remaining 80% instantly reconfigure and flow around the obstacle. This mirrors the architecture of cyberspace. Advanced persistent threats, or APTs, act as formless, shifting entities. They use constant, subtle variations in code to probe, exhaust, and eventually penetrate traditional, static firewall defenses. In a volatile, highly complex environment, holding a rigid shape makes you a target. The capacity to remain fluid and adapt to the exact contours of an opponent is the ultimate offensive capability. Because it relies heavily on deception, espionage, and manipulation, Western critics often characterize the art of war as a purely amoral instruction manual for statecraft. But that reading misses the deeply moral objective at the center of the text. By insisting that a leader wins without fighting, the strategy actively demands the absolute preservation of the state and the strict minimization of physical destruction and human casualty. This creates a fascinating paradox for the master strategist. Sun Tzu notes that the greatest generals receive no reputation for wisdom and absolutely no credit for courage. When a victory is secured entirely through positioning and effortless action long before the battle begins, the outcome appears completely inevitable to the outside observer. There is no desperate heroic struggle. It is an exercise in profound ecological humility, where the leader prioritizes alignment with the natural momentum of reality over their own ego. Over 2 millennia, the physical tools of conflict have evolved from bronze swords and chariots to global supply chains and machine learning algorithms. Yet the ultimate weapon remains exactly what it was in ancient China, a strategist's mind, capable of architecting a system where fighting itself becomes entirely obsolete.